Hello and welcome to Grouchy Old Geeks episode 60. My name's Steve, my co-host is Scott.
Hello. Hello, welcome back. So for our main feature, we are anticipating the very imminent release of Dune, directed by Denis Villeneuve. And it feels like we've been talking about this film since we both saw and loved Blade Runner 2049. So we're both heavily invested in this film coming out, but it's both for both of us. It's a series of books that we've both loved for a really long time. It's jointly our favourite novel, but we never knew this. I guess until a few years after first starting to talk.
Yeah.
So we just kind of wanted to, I guess, do a retrospective of our relationship with the Dune Saga as it stands before everything changes in a month's time, and we've got a whole new take on it to enjoy.
Yes.
So when do you remember when you first became aware of Dune and how you consumed it and what you thought of it?
I do, oddly. So in high school, I would have been about 13. My brother had a paperback copy of Dune, the really old one from the 80s. Really dog-eared, spine was broken, and it sat on his bookshelf in his bedroom for years. And all the other books didn't interest me, but that one interested me. And I remember trying to read it back then, and I read some of it, and I didn't really understand it. It was a bit too dense. But then there was the film as well, which was probably a few years later. The Kyle MacLachlan with Sting.
So I think it came out in like 84, but back in the day, it took years for things to be available on video or to come out on TV. So even if the film came out in 84, it might have been 3 or 4 years before it would have been available to us to watch.
Yeah, 1984, you're right. Yeah, so it could have been on TV, in 87 or 88 or something. That's the first time I saw bits of it. And I just remember the strange kind of noises that Gurney and the others were making whilst they were...
The reading modules.
Yes, and all of that. And of course, it was Patrick Stewart, and all of that was just so odd. It was just so peculiar that I don't think they're doing that in the new ones, which is probably good because it just looked really weird.
So the reading modules, bizarrely, I think were entirely an invention for the film. I don't think they have them in the book at all.
No, I don't think so. It doesn't. No. They just have body shields.
Yeah.
That's it. But yeah, the weirding modules and the voice thing and all of that. Anyway, where did you first meet Dune then? How did you encounter it?
So interestingly, our introduction to it was really, really similar. So the first way that I was exposed to it was as the film. And it would have been at the same time, a couple of years older than you, but it would have been, whenever it was first on UK TV. So we probably saw it at exactly the same time. And I really liked it, and I still do. It gets lots of, to be quite frank, very fair criticism. But it's still something that I have a real soft spot for. I don't think because of the plot, because it's Denis Villeneuve is doing the first book as two long films, right? And they try and condense it in the David Lynch version in a way that's at best incoherent. But I absolutely love the design of it. I think it looks absolutely stunning, and I love the universe that they created. And it was very quickly after that I tried to read the book, but I had exactly the same reaction as you did. I think I was just too young.
Right.
And it was too dense for it to really appeal to me. So I started it, decided it wasn't for me, and then just gave up on it fairly early on. And then when I was doing my A-levels, so when I was about 17, 18, I had a friend of mine who was absolutely obsessed with it. Like, could barely talk about anything else. And it was him that kind of caused me to pick it up, and I absolutely loved it. And I can think of several things where around about that age, I had kind of a similar experience. I tried it once when I was just a bit too young. It didn't really work for me. And then when I was a little bit older, it really transformed. And Dune was definitely one of them, one of those experiences. I don't think at the time I immediately went on and read all the other books in the series.
Right. I didn't either, no.
But it was probably so Dune is probably the novel that I reread the most times, I think.
Right.
And that includes, and so it was probably on my second reread that I went and read the sequels that are of mixed quality, I think. I absolutely love some of them.
Yeah.
Some of them are bordering on unreadable, in my opinion. But that, yeah, so similar. So you tried to read the books and then you saw the film, and I was the other way around. But in terms of reading it for the first time, not getting on with it, and then coming back to it for a second time, we had exactly the same experience there.
Yeah, yeah. So if I think about the books, so it was years later, having reread Dune, that I then went back and read Dune Messiah, which is fairly short, and Children of Dune, which makes sense because they're both quite short books.
Yeah.
And isn't it the fourth one, God Emperor of Dune, that's like thousands of years later, where his son is, spoilers for everyone who hasn't read a book from 1981, is a giant sandworm, immortal emperor. That's the fourth one, isn't it?
So I can't. I'll get mixed up between the fourth and the fifth one. One of them is God Emperor of Dune.
That's the fourth one,
which I really, really love. And then the other one is, I really like. I know it's a controversial opinion.
Wow.
But I really, really like God Emperor of Dune. The one that I think is really, the one which I find unreadable is Chapter House Dune.
Okay, so looking at the list, you got God Emperor of Dune 4, 81, Heretics of Dune 1984, and then Chapter House Dune 1985.
Right.
So my read was the exact opposite. I loved 1, 2 and 3 were good and interesting. I found 4, God Emperor of Dune, absolutely intolerable, unreadable pap. I found the promise of the golden path and all the other stuff that they built up. When I got to that one, I just found it such a disappointment. It was just a giant fart of a book that I just read and thought, what on earth is this? It felt so different. Now, I know we talk about that later, that his son has gone on to write books and prequels with Kevin J. Anderson and stuff, and I've not read any of them. But I just got to that fourth one and I thought, they build up things in the first one, with Paul being the Kwisatz Haderach, and then talking about the golden path and what's to come, and then his son is perhaps, his purpose was only there to lead his son to something greater, and then his son just ends up as the eternal giant sandworm despot who then sets up his own downfall. And I read it and I thought, what is this? So I haven't read Chapter House or Heretics. I just never got around to them. That put me off so much.
I really like it.
Is the next one any good? Heretics?
I honestly can't remember anything about
You can't
Heretics.
stand Chapter House?
I really disliked Chapter House Dune.
What's that one about?
Well, based on what you just said, that's the one that you should really read. Because if I loved God Emperor and you hated it, and then I hated Chapter House, you should go straight to that one.
Oh man. Wow. Oh dear. Yeah, I've reread 1, 2, and 3. I just can't go back and read 4 again. That that time I read it. Fairly recently, in the last 10 years, I read it and just thought, oof. I'll tell you what, though, the TV series they did in the 90s was really, really good. That was amazing. I think that... Have you seen it?
I've seen the Sci-Fi Channel one. I didn't realize it was that old.
So it's 2000.
Okay.
They did Dune and then they did Children of Dune. So they kind of merged. They kind of jump a bit. The first 6 or 8 parter was just focusing on Paul, and then the next one is where the twins are. Well, I think in the books they're like 11 or 12, but in this it was James McAvoy, and he was supposed to be late teens, but he's probably actually in his early 20s.
Yeah, and William Hurt was his father, wasn't he? I think.
Yes, that was the year 2000. Now that's how crazy it was.
I would have. Yeah, it kind of makes sense if the Marvel movies have been going on for 10 years, but yeah, when you said it was that old, I thought, Is there been a previous TV series?
No, this is what I like. It can't be that long. Oh wait, if Marvel had gone for 10 years, and it was sometime before that. I mean, the Millennium was only about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
I really liked that sci-fi series. I thought they did a really good job.
They had space to explore instead of cutting into a 2-hour film, and you just cut out so much.
And I thought it was. Generally, there's one character in it that I really didn't take to at all. But other than that, I thought it was really, really well cast.
Who didn't you take to?
So the character that I really struggled with, and not that the person that plays this character will ever listen to this. But I want to say it's not, it's nothing personal, but I just really found it difficult to take to the character the way it was portrayed of Gurney Halleck in the sci-fi show, possibly because I obviously absolutely love Patrick Stewart, and Patrick Stewart played that character in the David Lynch version. But I just didn't think the way that he delivered the lines just didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought every other character was absolutely spot on.
So they filmed, from what I remember, they filmed a lot of it in Europe, in like the Czech Republic and things. So some of the actors they got were local, and 20 years ago, it was less common to hear Czech accents or see Czech actors on TV. And it gave them the version of them feeling other, which is what you want the Fremen to feel like. And that really helped. So I can't even I can't pronounce the name of the actor who played Stilgar, but he was absolutely fantastic. The actress who played Cheney, she was brilliant. I'm trying to find her name now, but Barbara Kodotova, maybe I want to say, but she's a Czech actress, and she was brilliant. She was absolutely brilliant. But yeah, it was an English guy playing Paul. Alec Newman, as Muad'Dib. He was good. And Ian McNeice as the Baron he was fantastic. I met him as well. I think I told you this years ago, but after the sci-fi series came out, I got the box set, and a really nice one. And I went to an event, and Ian McNeice was there, and I got him to sign it. And we were just chatting away at his table for ages, and he was telling us about how the difference between working on UK TV, which he's predominantly known for, and then he went and did this sci-fi show. And, and it was one of those things like, in Babylon 5, they filmed it in his factory, and you don't really know what's going on. You don't hear anything because you can kind of a bubble. He said, we filmed this in Europe and filmed this here and filmed this there. And, he thought, it'll do quite well. I don't really know, but hopefully. And then he got invited to the premiere in America, and they flew him out there, and very nice, very nice. And he gets there, and a car picks him up for the airport. You think, oh, this is very nice. And on the way to the sort of premiere, they go past the building, and his wife kind of pokes him and says, "Look, look, look!" And he's like, "What?" And there's all these massive posters hanging off the side of buildings, not sort of 6-foot billboards, but stories high. And one of them is him as the Baron. He's like, "Oh, okay, this is how they do it in America. It's really big scale. He's like, wow, my face is really big. And it's just like a massive poster of him as the Baron. And he's like, okay, now I know what we're doing. So he had just a fantastic time on the whole thing. He was telling us all these stories, except when he was in a contraption and they dangle him around and he'd be floating around. It felt like a giant nappy. But but yeah, he had a brilliant time. I loved that version because we got space and time. So Denis Villeneuve's doing 2 3-hour-ish movies. And if you get director's cuts later, they might be longer. But that had 6 hours. And then I think The Children of Dune had 4 or 5 hours as well. And they did really well, I think.
Yeah, they were as much as I have a soft spot specifically for the design of the David Lynch version. I don't think there's any argument that the Sci-Fi Channel shows were objectively better in almost every single way.
Yeah, no. The guy, apart from your thing about the person who played Gurney, but the rest of it was just brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And they were able to expand on it and do Children of Dune fairly soon afterwards, only a couple of years later, I think, or even the following year. So we've both read some of the books. Have you read any of the prequels, any of the sequels that were done later with Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson?
No. And they could be brilliant. And I genuinely don't know whether I've not heard anything about, I've literally heard nothing about them, positive or negative. I've seen them in bookshops on a shelf, and that's genuinely, the fact that they exist is honestly the only thing that I know about them.
Right.
But there's I just have no interest in them at all. I hope they're brilliant, but I just don't. I just don't have any confidence that they are. What have you? Do you know anything about them? Have you tried to read them?
And I haven't read them. I know that they're based upon the notes left behind by Frank Herbert, and that his son worked on it with Kevin J. Anderson, who was, who is a renowned science fiction writer. He's been doing science fiction for 30 years, Mars books and all the rest of it. So it made sense for his son to team up with an established science fiction author. So they wrote 2 based upon the notes of Frank Herbert, the father. And I think they did well enough. They probably did okay, and the fans will quibble on them. But I know they then have gone back and done prequel novels. And I don't know how much that's based upon anything. That could just be complete, fiction on their part. And I'm not okay with that kind of thing. Or I think some of them, they reference something in Dune in historic things, and then they've gone back and written about that kind of thing. And I'm like,
so the big historic thing that they mentioned they mentioned all through the Frank Herbert versions, but they mentioned quite a lot, is the Butlerian Jihad.
Yes.
Which was basically why they don't have any advanced computers or artificial intelligences and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it was this sort of this AI uprising from about something crazy like 10,000 years before the books are set. So not knowing anything about the books, if they're going back to a historic event that's referred to, I can only imagine it is the Butlerian Jihad.
I would think so. It's going to go through all the different kind of phases. I just, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go back and things. It's just like, Terry Pratchett made sure they steamrolled all of his hard drives with all of his old book ideas and notes on, so that they couldn't do this. And I understand that thing. There's a lot of stuff that I've written in over the years that before I got to where I am, that's rubbish. I'm learning as I go. I don't want someone digging that up when I'm gone and trying to make money off some crap that I didn't think was worth, So I don't know. I just something. It's like Star Wars prequels. You don't need to know some of the stuff. You can just refer to it, and then it moves on and it creates the character in the present. You don't need to then see the story in full because you already know the broad strokes of what happens. You don't get anything else from it.
That's the thing that drove me. As much as I find it a likable film, that's the thing that drove me absolutely nuts about the Han Solo prequel story.
Yeah.
Because it's like, right at the beginning, they must have stood there with a whiteboard and been like, right, we need to know why he got the name Solo. We need to have him meeting Chewbacca. We need to have him winning the Millennium Falcon. And they just stuff all of these things in there that are just based on, at best, one-liners from The Empire Strikes Back or something like that.
Yeah.
And there's no need to show all of these things. I hate it when they do things like that.
So my fear is that this is what some of this will be, going back and exploring stuff. And if it's, I'd rather his son just sort of said, right, I'm doing a book 10,000 years in the future, because then it's a clean slate in terms of you're not tied into something that has to set up for something years later. I mean, they're doing that with Game of Thrones. They're going so many thousand years into the past and retelling stuff for the spin-off show. And there again, it's going to be so tenuous, the link. Only the hardcore fans will get it. The rest of us will just go, that's a familiar name, and that's fine. But yeah, I'm not keen. But anyway, so should we talk about the new Denis Villeneuve film and TV series?
This is news to me.
Oh no, I told you about this.
You probably did.
He's doing a TV series about the sisters, about
the Bene Gesserit.
Yes. I think they're doing it fairly soon after. However, he's only done one of the two films that's making up the first book. So I thought they'd filmed all of it, but they haven't. They've only actually filmed the first half.
Oh, that's a real surprise, because I assumed that they did a Lord of the Rings, right, where they basically they did all of the live shooting for all three films, essentially in one go, in one 18-month massive shooting schedule, and then did all the post-production for each film in the year before it came out.
And
I assumed, because it was kind of always planned to be two films, wasn't it?
Yes.
So they must have gone in knowing that they're going to have to come back and shoot all this stuff again. So that's really bizarre to me that they just didn't make I hate to bring accountancy into it, but the thing that would be cost effective, right, would be just to do all at the same time.
It is. You would think so. But from the latest news story I read yesterday, Villeneuve is currently writing the script for the second part with his screenwriting partner, and they could begin filming the sequel in the autumn, to everybody else in the world, of 2022. So this week, whilst he was talking on a Canadian radio show, Villeneuve, this is my other bit of news, revealed that he's considering making a Dune trilogy with an adaptation of Dune Messiah for the third part. So that's what he's thinking about. So we're still going to have part 2, which will wrap up the first book, and then threads will be left dangling, and he may do a third film for Dune Messiah.
So two things there. One, I'm now wondering if I can email him and persuade him to do God Emperor of Dune instead. But the second one is, I assumed, based on complete ignorance, that we were going to see the first half of basically the first half of the first book in a couple of months' time, and then 12 months after that, we were going to see the second half of the first book, like happened with the Lord of the Rings. But now you're telling me that in 2022 is when he's going to start writing the second one. So we're not going to see it until...
So he's writing it now, but they won't start filming it until next year, which means we won't see it until 2023.
At best.
However, then there's the Sisterhood TV series, which is going to be about the Bene Gesserits. It's going to air on HBO Max, but I don't know if that's been written. My guess is not. I don't know when that's potentially going to air or how it's going to work in relation to the film. It's don't know. We just don't know.
Yeah, he says, and it's clearly, the Bene Gesserits in the books are basically the puppet masters, right? They're the people behind that are manipulating things behind the scenes.
Yes,
and they're super powerful, but they basically just let emperors and kings and dukes act like they've got all the power, but the Bene Gesserits are the ones they're manipulating things in the background. But because of that, because they don't ever, or they've only very, very rarely come out of the shadows, they're not really prominently featured in any of the books. So this is going to be a series inspired by the books, but not based on anything in the books.
No,
which I hope is great, but yeah,
it's concern. It's like, well, what are the stories going to be about? How's it going to work? Is it about them creating building things in the present to create the future? How does it work? So I don't know. It's going to have to be quite mystical and tie into all of the prophecies and all the things that he set up in the first couple of books, all of that sort of thing. But so the first film apparently is 155 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little over 2 hours, near 2.5 hours, and it's going to be released on October the 22nd in theaters and on HBO Max. Which I understand why, not just because of COVID, that's probably spurred things on for this dual release, which they were doing it a little bit anyway, did day and date digital release, but they weren't really doing it on the big blockbusters. They're doing it on the smaller films that weren't going to make as much.
So obviously, the very first thing that we saw that did it, and I'm confident that you saw this, was Trolls World Tour. But they did the biggest film that I'm aware of where they did it was Black Widow, which I've not seen.
Not me neither.
But Black Widow is would have been in pre-pandemic days a major
blockbuster
cinema release.
Yeah. So now they're doing it for this. I think I've said this before. It would be a crime to see it on a small screen. For that, everything they're bringing together. Hans Zimmer doing the music, all the visuals, that writing, that cast, the amazing CGI. I want to see the sandworm come up. I want to feel the chair shake. I want the speakers to deafen me with its roar. I'm not going to get that from my TV unless I strap one to each of my head, either side of my head. I'm just not going to get it. So
the thing is, as much as I love Denis Villeneuve, and I kind of get the impression in Hollywood, he's very, very well respected as a director because he's done some really big stuff that hasn't really been a massive commercial success. Like Blade Runner 2049, I thought was absolutely brilliant, but I have a feeling that it didn't make like massive money at the box office. So maybe this is an opportunity to make more money on streaming. I just don't know. I really don't know how these things work nowadays.
Let's have a look. So Blade Runner 2049, the budget was 150 million.
Mm-hmm.
Worldwide, it made 259 million. So 109 million profit, which don't they sort of say you have to kind of double it to once you cover all the marketing and promotion and PR?
Yeah, I think I really don't understand this, but I think you basically have to double it to break even when you take into account everything.
But it's made 109 million profit off the box office, and then off that doesn't include now digital sales and everything else, which obviously accounts for a good chunk. And buying it on demand, people buy the DVDs and the Blu-rays, and
was going to say,
special editions.
I've bought it about 5 times, so I'm doing my part.
There you go. And I bought the digital version so I can watch it on telly, even though I've seen it at the cinema. So yeah, he's a well-regarded guy. And I hope this does well. But as has proven in recent times, even other big box office films at the moment are struggling in the cinema because people are still nervous about going. Pandemic is still rampant in some places. It's still out of control. And a cinema is a very confined space with lots of aircon, recycling the air, which doesn't feel good for a lot of people, And masks are no longer compulsory in some places. So I don't know. I want it to do really well. I want it to be fantastic. It sounds like they're going ahead with part 2 anyway, because it's not out yet and he's writing it. So I'm assuming they've given him the green light to at least finish this off. And then if it does well, he'll do the third one. But like you, I wish he'd write part 2. And if he's definitely going to do part 3 as Children of Dune, or something, just do it now. Do it back to back with the other one. So everybody's still there, because you don't want the actors changing suddenly if someone dies or gets a bit older or changes how they look. Or like you, I thought they were just doing an 18-month stint like Lord of the Rings, and then they come out once a year.
Yeah, that's that's surprising. That's completely surprised me. Yeah,
but I'm still looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to this first half. They did like a special thing recently where you could watch the first 10 minutes at an IMAX and stuff. Apparently, you have to pay obviously and go for that. And some people said that was brilliant. So it's getting the fans excited. But it's less. It's less than 2 months away now. I will be going to see it in the cinema for sure.
Yeah, if I it feels like I've hit a point. I was kind of always like this, although the director's changed. It feels like I've hit a point now where the director alone is enough to get me to go to the cinema,
right?
Or enough to put me off going to the cinema. So, the last films that I really anticipated going to see was Blade Runner 2049 by Denis Villeneuve, Dunkirk by Christopher Nolan, and Tenet by Christopher Nolan as well. So, yeah, Denis Villeneuve has got my loyalty to get me to go to the cinema.
Yeah, both of us for sure. So let's find out. I guess people get in contact, see if they've read any of the other books. What do they like? Did they like the sequels? Do you like the prequels? Let us know. Get in touch with us in all the usual ways. We're on a Facebook group. Come and talk to us on there. It's probably the best place. We're on email as well. And I guess in 2 months' time, we'll be talking about the film and sharing our thoughts on how it measured up to our expectations. That's going to be interesting. Got high hopes.
Can you imagine if we have to do an episode where we talk about how terrible we thought it was?
Utter disappointment, shambles.
We get to a point where we say, and that musical number in the middle was.
I thought the weirding was bad on the Lynch version, but this time the weirding machine. Oh no. What was he thinking? Kazoos. Anyway, yes, I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, so yeah, we'll be talking about that in 2 months' time, but we'll be back next month as usual in September. But in the meantime, it's good night for me,
and it's good night for me.
Good night.
Good night.